Hi, welcome to Rick Snyder's Washington, here on YouTube where I can tell the longer stories that people love to listen to. You can still see me on Twitter and Facebook for the daily stuff, but here's where we tell some long stories. And today I thought, why not do one people always ask me about? They go, what is so-and-so like? Okay, so I think I'm going to run down a bunch of TV guys I've met over the years. Obviously, I didn't work with them, but I worked around them, pressers and things, and I had impressions of them all. It's kind of a little bit of a list of names you'll recognize. Starting off with Jimmy the Greek Snyder. Now, he and I both have the same last name, but we do spell it differently. I'm not related to the Greek, but when I covered horse racing, you always have a nickname at the track. Everybody does. And, everybody will call me the Greek in return. But I did meet Jimmy the Greek once, and I grew up watching him. We were at the Kentucky Derby, where I covered it about 20 years. I think it's in the late 80s. The Greek is there in the backstretch. He's holding court like the Greek does wherever he is. And he says, it's Friday, the day before the Derby. And he goes, I am betting $100 on this 99-1 shot. I recommend you do it too. Well, the Greek was no better at picking winners than anybody else, but I thought, why not? And damn if it didn't come in. It was a happy day when you can hit a 99-1 shot. The legend was that there was 20 horses in the Derby, and the Greek would go on 20 different radio stations, pick a different horse in each, so he could always say he won the Derby. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't put it past them. The Derby, also, Pete Axtell I met. First time I met him, the guy was the life of the party, and he always was. And I got to pick against him once at Upper Marlboro. They had a special meeting. They brought in Pete, and he and I put our picks up, and I beat him. We both stunk, but I beat him that day, and I thought, man, that's a career high when you can beat Pete Axtell like that. Howard Cosell. Met him, kind of hung out in an elevator with him at RFK Stadium. And if you've ever been in that elevator, you know it goes pretty slow, so you get a couple minutes. And Howard never gives me the time of day. Little guy. But he's talking to everybody, and, Howard's the only voice he wants to hear, so it was just kind of cool to be, 2 feet away from a legend like that and hear him talk, getting ready for a Monday night football game at RFK. Brent Mussberger, one of the nicest people I have ever met. I covered a Maryland at Wisconsin basketball game probably around 2004, maybe 05, and Brent was covering it too. It was a late game. I think I got back to my hotel about 1 a.m., and for some reason I caught a 6 a.m. flight out of Madison, Wisconsin. Who's in line in front of me? Brent Mussberger. And everybody in the airport wants to come by and say hello to Brent. Now I know he's every bit as tired as I am, and yet he could not have been more gracious. And he recognized me from the day before, so we talked some sports on the way. I mean, this guy's the legend, man. You're like, whoa, Brent Mussberger. And he couldn't have been, I bet 50 people said hello to him. He said something back. Real gracious guy to show you how to be a nice person out there. Beano Cook. If you like college sports, I came across Beano some my early days. Beano could hold court too. Just tell one story after another. And I guess they were all true. They were awful funny, if nothing else. And my favorite one was always Beano would say, you know what LSU and vampires have in common? They both suck at night. And this was back when LSU would lose night games. So, I still remember that joke. It was a good one. Billy Packer, covered a college basketball game with him. Matter of fact, Packer had to take my seat at midcourt, but could not have been nicer about it. And I had to move over one, and then Packer forgot his coat, and I grabbed it, and later on I gave it to him, so he was happy with me. So it was just a chance encounter, but, sometimes these guys can be, But I have, most of them are pretty cool, nice guys that know how to do it, including Dickie V, baby. I know you Maryland fans like me, we supposedly hate Dickie V, but I got to tell you, Dickie V is awesome, baby. He is the nicest person. You meet him once, he will remember your name. And matter of fact, he wrote his autobiography or something. And next time he saw me, he had a copy for me, signed already to me. I know he always loves Duke. Okay, we'll just let that go for now. But Dickie V, if you get a chance to talk to Dickie V, do it. He's awesome, baby. Like I said. All right, we'll do local guys. Johnny Holiday, who's still around. And I grew up listening to Johnny Holiday. How old is this guy? But he is as nice a person as you would expect listening to him on the Maryland broadcast. Good local guy, has a lot of talents. He used to be on stage at one point. He's just a cool guy to hang around with too. He if you need a favor, Johnny would do it for you, even if he didn't know you. I mean, awesome guy to get to meet. The late Glenn Brenner, I actually visited his grave in Oak Hill Cemetery in Georgetown during the winter just to find it. And it's pretty easy to find overall. Glenn, I never worked with, but I saw him from afar. The first time I saw Glenn, I was 19. And it was career day at Prince George's Community College, where I was on the student paper before I transferred to Maryland. And Glenn came to give a speech, about it. And what turned out to be a typical Glenn, I didn't know, is he said, "Okay, what do you want to know?" And I kept that style. I took it for my own. I do that all the time when I would do career days and all. I don't need to do some big speech. What do you want to know? And he did an hour Q&A on things. Glenn was funny guy. And we have a couple current guys like that. Chick Hernandez, who I think worked for Glenn. Brant Weinstein, who's on the radio. Man, they're both hilarious guys. I think it's something to do with the entertainment aspects of their job. But Glenn was just natural. I mean, he might be down in human resources now, in this climate. But I remember once I was covering a golf tournament, and all of a sudden, here comes this golf cart over top of a dune. It actually cleared and reached the air. And they slammed down the two guys and kept on hauling. And you think, what lunatic was that? It was Glenn. And he's laughing like hell and rolling along. And it was just like, if you were around Glenn Brenner, you were laughing about things. His interview with George Foreman on the set, where he brought George a whole turkey to just eat with his hands. Man, that was classic TV. That was an awesome one. George Michael. George was a complicated guy at times. Very competitive, wanted to win. And it showed up in his whole life. He was a very successful DJ back in radio days. And then he came to Washington and became number one. Glenn had passed away and George emerged as the number one. He had the sports machine with videotape. That was all new. Had his own hotline with scores. Did a lot of front running things. Very tough on those around him because he wanted them to be excellent at what they did. And he would always help people get jobs. Glenn was a good supporter. He could be tough to deal with. Sometimes he'd be on the TV and he'd want to knock my story that I was writing. And, I'd tell him, "Glenn, my family and friends live in this town. Stop it. Just say the Washington Times where I work. Don't have to say my name because they think you're telling the truth. And I know you're not." And, Glenn would sit there and one day he came up on the sideline to me and goes, "How the hell did you beat me to this story?" I said, "Glenn, I live on this sideline. If I can't beat you here in my own house, I must suck. So that's why I'm going to keep beating you." One day, Glenn always had the biggest stuff. Like, we had golf carts. I didn't have one personally, but TV guys had golf carts. What's Glenn do? He comes with George comes with a golf cart that like seats 12 people or something. I'd never seen anything like it. That was just his style. It was a big style. Once he had the very corner tent on the edge of the field past the end zone when we were in Carlisle. And we're in practice, and all of a sudden you hear this, and you're like, "Wow, what happened?" Some woman jumped the curb and ran over the fence and crashed into George's tent. But George wasn't there filming at the time. Well, that was one of the craziest things I ever saw at practice. But George was a good guy. At the end of the day, he was a good guy and very good at what he did. I went to his funeral, and I miss George. I miss debating things with him. He was just fun. And finally, I'll end up with Warner Wolf. You know what? Don't meet your idols, friends, because they're not always the nicest of people. And I grew up in the 70s listening to Warner Wolf on Channel 9, and he'd do the Boo of the Week, and he would do a lot of stuff like that. And he was just a front runner back in the 70s. Then he went to New York, and then he came back for a while. And I remember Gordon Pearson looked at him after Warner had been gone for years and comes back and makes his debut. And Gordon goes, "Wow, it was a hell of a vacation you took." It was funny. So all these guys are always fun. I hung out with a lot of these guys, especially local, at training camp. We have a beer and tell stories. And it was just always a good time with these guys. So, if you meet the guys on TV, say hello to them. They're usually pretty friendly people overall. Okay, well, that's today's story. I'm Rick Snyder for Rick Snyder's Washington. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000. We're about 600, so I always appreciate you helping me out. Doesn't cost you a thing. Just hit subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Thanks for coming.